She thought she was alone in her grief, standing at her son's grave on a cold, quiet afternoon. But then she saw her, a young black waitress, clutching a small child, tears streaming down her face. Something about the way she stood there, trembling, made the billionaire's heart stop. Who was this woman? Why was she crying at his son's grave? What unfolded next would uncover secrets, challenge everything she believed, and reveal a truth about injustice that no amount of money could hide. It was a crisp autumn afternoon, the sigh kind where the air feels heavy with memories. Margaret Wells, a woman whose life had been built on privilege and power, arrived at the cemetery as she did every month. She was the kind of billionaire who kept her grief locked away, tucked behind charity galas and polished smiles. Today was meant to be quiet, a moment to leave fresh flowers, whisper a few words, and go. But as she made her way down the gravel path, the soft hum of wind was broken by the faint sound of someone sobbing. Just a few rows away, a young black woman stood with a small boy clinging to her leg, her shoulders shaking in silent pain. Margaret froze. There was no reason for her to be here. And yet, something told Margaret this was no coincidence. Margaret's steps slowed as she watched the young woman wipe her tears and try to steady the small boy beside her. His tiny hand clutched her skirt like it was the only safe thing left in the world. Something about their quiet despair pulled at Margaret's chest. But before she could speak, a security guard from the cemetery walked toward them. His voice was sharp, impatient. "You can't be here without permission," he said, his eyes narrowing, not at Margaret, but at the woman and her child. Margaret frowned. She had never once been stopped in this place, never asked for permission. The young woman's voice was trembling as she explained she was visiting someone she loved. But the guard didn't soften. He asked for proof, then for identification, his tone dripping with suspicion. The boy's eyes darted nervously, sensing his mother's unease. The woman's hands shook as she reached into her bag, but before she could pull anything out, the guard took a step closer, blocking her view of the gravestone she'd been standing by. Margaret felt an unfamiliar heat rising in her chest. She wanted to intervene, but something kept her frozen. Was it the shock of seeing this so plainly, here, in a place meant for peace? The guard's voice grew louder, demanding they leave, if they couldn't verify their right to be here. The young woman's lips pressed together. She glanced at her son, then back at the gravestone. There was something in her eyes, a deep, unspoken grief mixed with a quiet defiance. She didn't move. And then, the guard reached for his radio. Margaret's heart pounded. She didn't know this woman, didn't know why she was at her son's grave, but every instinct screamed that what she was witnessing was wrong. The guard's words, his stance, his entire demeanor, it wasn't about rules. It was about something much darker. The boy began to cry, and the woman knelt to comfort him. "We won't be long," she whispered, but the guard didn't care. His hand hovered over the radio like he was ready to call for backup. Margaret finally took a step forward. "Is there a problem here?" she asked, her voice sharper than she intended. The guard hesitated, his eyes flicking from her expensive coat to the young woman's worn uniform. "This area's restricted," he muttered, but the tone softened. Toward Margaret, not the woman. Margaret felt the sting of the truth. Her wealth and skin color were shields this mother and child didn't have. The woman stood, her face pale but steady. "We're here for my brother," she said quietly. "He served this country. He's buried here." Margaret's breath caught. She looked at the gravestone behind them and for the first time noticed the name etched into it. It wasn't her son's name, but the date of death and the circumstances. Something clicked, and what Margaret was about to learn would not only connect their lives in a way she never imagined, it would tear open a story of injustice that had been buried for far too long. The guard's voice crackled through the radio, calling for immediate assistance, as if the woman and her child were a threat. Within minutes, two more uniformed men appeared, their footsteps heavy on the gravel. The air shifted, thicker, colder. Margaret could feel it, the unspoken message in the way their eyes locked on the young mother. "You don't belong here." The boy clung tighter to his mother's leg, his small body trembling. One of the guards stepped forward, his hand resting on his belt, not near a weapon, but in a way that made the moment feel dangerous all the same. "Ma'am, you need to leave. Now," he barked. The woman's voice shook, but her words were clear. "I have every right to be here. My brother died serving this country." She gestured to the headstone. "This is his grave." The guards didn't look, didn't care. Margaret's pulse was hammering. She had spent her life surrounded by lawyers, power, influence. But here, in this quiet corner of a cemetery, none of that seemed to matter for the woman in front of her. Her skin color was a verdict, and the sentence was already decided. One guard reached out to grab the woman's arm. The boy began to cry harder, his voice cracking as he called out for his mother. Margaret felt something snap inside her. She stepped between them, her voice rising. "You will not touch her." The guards hesitated, caught off guard by her sudden fury. "She's here for her family," Margaret continued, her voice steady now. "And you will show her the same respect you'd show me." Silence fell, but it wasn't over. The look in the guard's eyes told Margaret that this moment, this confrontation, wasn't just about one woman and her child. It was about the deep, ugly truth she had been able to ignore all her life. And in the next breath, the woman revealed a detail that would shatter everything Margaret thought she knew about her own son's death. The woman's voice was steady now, though her hands still trembled as she spoke. Her brother, she explained, had served alongside Margaret's son overseas. They had been friends, close friends. On the day Margaret's son died, her brother had been there too, and he hadn't made it home either. But while Margaret's son was honored with ceremony and headlines, her brother's sacrifice had been quietly buried. His family left to navigate grief alone. Margaret felt the ground shift beneath her. She had always believed she understood loss. But she realized, now that grief isn't equal, not in a world where race still decides whose pain is seen and whose is ignored. The confrontation ended without arrests, but the damage lingered. The guards walked away, their eyes cold, as if nothing had happened. Margaret and the young woman stood in the silence, two mothers bound by tragedy, separated by the world's cruel divisions. In the days that followed, Margaret couldn't let it go. She used her influence to demand recognition for the young woman's brother, pushing for his name to be honored alongside her son's. But no matter how many doors she opened, she couldn't erase the memory of those minutes at the grave, how easily dignity had been stripped from a grieving black mother simply because of who she was. This wasn't just about one moment in a cemetery. It was about a system that has decided time and again whose grief matters. And until that changes, the same quiet injustices will play out in thousands of places, unseen and unchallenged. So the question remains, if you saw it happening right in front of you, would you step forward or would you walk away?